works. As long as you make me look good and you're catching the right angle, I'm
Well,
good
I
with
don't
it
think
all.
I don't think I need to work to make that happen, man. I can't take my eyes off that beard. It's unbelievable coming from a guy who can't grow shit.
You got some ammo to work with, and Suraj too. Just keep going. You got to go.
I'm trying to be like you, bro. To be honest, I'm trying to be like you, man. I've been growing this thing for about 4 weeks now, and
Keep going. You just got to pass through like the mucky, itchy stage, and then it's all
that's
clear.
it. But mate, you know what? It's the maintenance for me. It's maintaining it that gets irritating because it gets very scruffy, and you got to know how to like trim it up. And to me, I'm too simple minded to manage that. It's very difficult.
I'm with you. The maintenance is a tough part, but it is easier than launching a company. I'll put it that way.
Man, speaking of which, I just looked at your LinkedIn and you've gone from kind of founder in residence to, Sunrise AI, if I'm not mistaken. So you have kind of launched your company in the last, couple of weeks or?
Yes. It was interesting. Like, I don't even know how to define launch, to be honest with you, right? Like, and my barometer for understanding launches as such. If you think about any large company, like, does anyone ever recall when they launched, when there was a launch party or a launch event? Like, I can't think of anything, right? So for me, it's more about ramping up and just getting started and throwing your V0.1 just out there. So in the interest of time and moving fast and just getting shit up and popping, that's what I did. So that's what I'm doing, if that makes sense.
Man, makes 100% sense.
Just out of curiosity, what's the product? What are you building for myself and our listeners who don't know?
Sure. I am building an AI-powered credit risk assessment tool. So think about essentially upending the traditional credit scoring system. Not sure how it is in the UK or in the EU, but in America, there's essentially an oligopoly around retail individual credit worthiness. There's three main factions, I should say. They operate as one, and they essentially dictate and are the gatekeepers of access to capital. And there's PhD theses written on this, moreover, but how biased, unfair, exclusive it is to get access to capital. And I truly believe that access to capital equals access to opportunity. So we have the technology and the tools to do it, namely through artificial intelligence and machine learning, to really, truly, in a genuine fashion, assess an individual's creditworthiness. And we should be proactively employing those methodologies to make the system more fair and unbiased.
Can you talk about then actually on a quite a granular basis, what was the system before and what are you trying to make it?
Sure. The system before is essentially a weighted scorecard that's incomplete, inaccurate, and just plain wrong. So let me spell out a case study where perhaps some of your friends and colleagues that maybe have moved to the States, they may have a great paying job. They may be credit-worthy folks, but you may or may not heard of the difficulties they have in, say, applying to an apartment and getting accepted as a tenant, or opening up a credit card, right? Or just gaining access to capital, even small things like just day-to-day lives. And a lot of that is based on the fact that many companies, many landlords, anyone who's extending credit will look at your credit score. That credit score is predicated essentially on outside vendors reporting to these credit agencies whether or not James or Suraj have paid their bills and did they pay them in full and on time. On top of that, they'll look at your credit card statements and see, hey, what is the track record here? Unfortunately, there's over 23% of the population here, and that excludes foreign nationals, just simply do not have that financial track record here in the States. They're just simply not registered yet, or there's not enough data that has them logged into the overall financial system. That then precludes them from gaining or even manifesting a credit score, and then blocks them from accessing capital. That's the current system as we have it today.
What sort of things would that be to get onto the financial system in terms of proving that you can pay back your credit?
Time, and simply making sure that you pay your bills on time, and you are making sure those vendors that you're paying are reporting actively to the credit agencies. That's one of the biggest flaws. The credit agencies don't have all the information, right? It's not all the time your credit card or your landlord or your utility company is reporting to these credit agencies. So there's an incomplete picture as to what an individual's credit track record is. Moreover, look, these are large archaic companies. They're not necessarily employing the state-of-the-art, most contemporized systems. It's inaccurate. 1 out of 4 credit reports simply have misinformation or inaccurate information that are detrimental to an individual's credit score. So it is by no means a great, perfect, or accurate system.
So is it the case that one data point out of, let's say, 100 per individual could completely outweigh the other 99? Like, I'm thinking of an example where you take someone who's maybe 19 years old, wants to buy a $750K dollar house. They don't have a job. They literally, on paper, they're not employed. They look like somebody who would not be able to pay this back. Whereas the one detail is that one of their relatives is a multimillionaire and they have an inheritance from them. Like, because to me, that one data point would outweigh everything else. So is there certain other examples in the industry with data points that essentially say, okay, this is a tick, so yeah, go for it?
I would call that an edge case, but that person that you just described would have an extremely difficult time trying to convince your run-of-the-mill commercial bank to extend them a home mortgage. Very, very tough.
Is that because they don't have a regular income that's being paid?
It's a number of factors. It's a weighted scorecard, right? Their income, what their track record is at 19, obviously would be very limited. But it's also things like, and up until recently, they included things like your zip code, which, to be honest, is modern day speak for redlining, right? And that could be a quite racist and prejudiced way of ascertaining whether someone should get credit or not.
Yeah.
So what we're doing at Sunrise is building a model and instituting an alternative way to determine creditworthiness that's predicated on sort of 2 pillars. One is your own individual track record outside of whatever's proactively reported, but then layering on credit fundamental analysis that you do akin to an institutional level as well. So it's sort of speaking to, I guess, my old employer, Morgan Stanley, some of that DNA kicking in from a previous career.
So I guess that's interesting. And obviously you don't want to spill your secret sauce and like what kind of, formulation or algos you use on the back end to determine someone's credit worthiness. But it does kind of tie to the point I think you just made. I've seen similar things done in or talked about in prison systems. So kind of automating, what should the sentence be based on, their environment and the people, like even the people they're around. And then obviously things like race bias start to creep into it. And it's obviously a very difficult and tricky problem to navigate. Is that kind of a similar problem you're facing in terms of actually trying to dig in, and how many data points are there really that you can say, all right, these are fair and these are just, and they're not kind of predicated on some kind of bias?
Yeah, great question, James, right? Where we're starting, our first use case, so to say, is the rental ecosystem. I can go on and on about housing in the United States, tons of problems, lots of macroeconomic pressures that are really adding tons of tension to the system overall. But it's a really captive process. And what I mean by that is, let's take the example of anyone going and applying for an apartment, right? They're one of usually 10 plus applicants to any one unit. Now, typically, your landlord will then say, hey, as part of the application, write down your social security number. Give me your last couple of pay stubs so I know that you earn an X amount of income. Share with me your bank statements, your checking, savings accounts, perhaps your credit card statements over the last couple of months. It's a very limited data set. Number one, it's all analog. Number two, giving that identification information and very personal financial information on a piece of paper. Let's just say that's not the most secure way of doing things as well. You're literally handing it to a stranger. So let's reimagine what that process would look like. You're willing, because you need a place to live, you are willing to divulge, open up the kimono, so to say, and divulge all this personal information about yourself. And you're very comfortable doing it. That's just the way the system is. Instead, provide that information in a digitally secure way. But more importantly, what our model can do is dig into line itemized information on any one specific individual, going back 2-3 years of history. Our model can then ascertain, regardless of your credit score, hey, this person actually does pay rent on time and in full. This person has a regular paycheck that comes in fortnightly for the last 2-3 years. That in of itself are 2 variables, 2 data points that would have a direct impact and would have a direct correlation on a landlord ascertaining whether or not they should take on this tenant's credit risk. That is already a much superior methodology than what's in place today in terms of a subjective credit score that most landlords utilize. I mean, I'll paint a broader picture, right? This has applications to insurance, just gaining insurance, right? In terms of claims and frauds. This has applications to beyond just rental, the rental ecosystem, but home mortgages, right? Can someone get a loan? That example for the case study that you had mentioned, Suraj, right? Maybe that 19-year-old does have a job, right? Can this person support X amount of dollars every month for a monthly mortgage payment? Auto finance. Most of the country here in America needs a car to commute to work, for example, or just day-to-day lives. Can they afford a car payment, right? These are very dated. The market is huge in terms of the gatekeeping of access to capital ultimately.
So Deepak, a question I have is, are these models dictated to by what's happened in the past, or are they able to, are you building them in such a way that they'll be able to take recent information into account and make sort of almost ad hoc decisions?
It's a combination, right? And I think that's the beauty of the machine learning technology, right? You build the model with basic frameworks that are akin to, like I said, fundamental credit analysis that you could take from an academic angle, corporate finance methodologies. But at the same time, you're feeding it historical individual information. But what you've done is trained the model with millions of people, right? And their historical information. So that machine learning model, adding that layer, that framework on, gets better and better with time. The more data, the more accurate data, the better the model gets at actually in those predictive analytics. So it's a combination.
My question there is, what if the millions of data points of individuals you fed it have a bias in them? For example, what if in the past, because of societal bias, certain demographics were discriminated against for, let's say, getting a loan for a house? And then because the models absorb millions of rows of that kind of data, it's then spitting out biased results. Because ultimately, the model is only as good as the data you trained it on, right?
Of course. And right now, the data is so biased, right? So, for example, if you take the case of how credit agencies look at, they're only getting the bad data. Someone has to report, hey, Suraj did not pay their bill. I'm someone who did not benefit from that. They owed me $100 and they didn't pay their bill. That goes in a credit report. What's not going on a credit report is your landlord, for example, saying, hey, Suraj was an amazing tenant. He paid his rent on time for the last 3 years, every month to the day and in full. That does not go in here. So already that data is biased. However, because I'm getting access specifically from people to people and what they've actually done, I can tell. If you gave me access to you let me pipe into your banking account, Suraj, I can tell if you pay your rent on time and how much that rent is and if it's been consistent. That is already a much more clear picture of that data. That's the data that's being fed into the AI-powered model, not only the bad stuff. Now, to your point, though, there are inherent biases, right? From a statistical and empirical perspective, making sure we're running the right algorithms that take those biases into account. But more importantly, are we making sure that the outcome and the results are not biased, right? And that's where, like, look, I'm not an expert in everything, but I have employed advisors that are experts in exactly this type of stuff, right? Okay. I have an old friend and colleague. She's a professor from Duke University, and she specializes in biases in student loan debt. Look, same kind of concepts and frameworks. Keep me honest. Her name is Professor Otto. Professor Otto, keep me honest. Let me know if this is working. Look at the results. These are our outputs. Are they biased or not? There are statistical methods to understand if the outcomes are biased or not. So that social impact is a pervasive undertone in what we're building. Not even undertone, it's an overtone in what we're building. I think that's key and it's important. And that benefits all stakeholders.
Yeah. So on the back of the point you just made then, are you not kind of asking, to play devil's advocate for a bit, you're not asking kind of users to put more financial information in? As you said, okay, give me full like bank records and proof that I paid the rent on this time for X number of years. Is that not more of a so-called invasion of privacy to anyone who uses it? And have you kind of found that with any users in terms of pushback?
That's a great question. Now, have I found that live with users? I don't know yet. I'm here in day zero building this thing. Now, the POCs that we've begun to sort of test out, we have tried to ascertain exactly that, right? Because if I told you, James, like, hey, give me your access to your bank account over the last 2 years, trust me, you're going to have hesitations around that, right? But building what I built before in the last few companies I've started and sold, what I've always realized is you have to give the right amount of value back to the customer. If you're asking the customer for something, you have to give at least something that's of greater value to them. So in the case of the rental ecosystem, right? You as an applicant, as a tenant, give me access to your bank information. I will provide to the landlord a few things. One is a much better way of determining whether you are creditworthy or not. Two, protection of that privacy. You don't have to share directly with the landlord what your bank statements is, what your cash balance is. I can be that medium buffer. Number three, I'm also able to allow certain perks, right? So for example, I've gone through a bunch of customer discovery, and this is part of the benefit of being and working at a venture studio like the AI Fund, but spending a lot of time upfront on customer discovery. I've surveyed about 50 different landlords, spent anywhere from 30 to 90 minutes talking with them, had multiple 1,000 person surveys, and done the same with renters as well. And a few key learnings. One is landlords are willing to give rental rebates if they're assured of automatic payments on time and in full. And I can facilitate that for renters. Renters are willing to give me access to their information if I can secure them a rebate. So me, again, playing that medium gives them an immediate economic value. Number four, the other big perk is potential for rental deferment or new payment plans. In the last year, and this has definitely been spurred by COVID, there's been about a 15% uppage in rental delinquency, meaning just payment of rent is coming later and later, or just non-payment, or rental evictions, which has gone up about 22% in the last couple of decades. 85% of the landlords I've spoken to and surveyed have said, we are more than happy if there was a way to understand on a continuous dynamic basis that we could monitor the credit and financial health of our tenants. If we knew that there was in trouble or there was a yellow flag in their ability to pay, we would want to proactively negotiate a rent deferment plan. Again, that is a great benefit to that renter. And the feedback has been that renter is more than willing to give me that access to the financial information, allow them to be monitored, and then understand whether they do need to enter into that kind of protection or rental deferment plan. So again, as long as you are delivering value, I've found time and time again, customers are willing to share information.
That's really interesting. I really like the point you made there as well, because I think maybe out of all the things you said thus far, I see real value in that last piece, because I know it can cause, people under financial stress. It can cause them, more mental stress, more kind of headaches, and you're not sure whether you need to approach your mortgage provider or landlord or whoever it may be that's asking for your money, and that kind of cascades into other areas of your life. So I definitely see the value there. Is this, so you said you're kind of talking to users, you've done your surveys. Is this, an MVP? Do you have a platform? Are you rolling out to beta users? What's the kind of stage there?
This is day 0.5, I would say, right? You're catching me at just exiting the residency program at the AI Fund. My only goal right now, singular task in mind, is to get that MVP up, right? Build that model, train that model, refine that model. All things start and end my day with that model. That is the product. The product itself has to be 10x better than what's out there. It's the only secret to success that'll spur everything else that we're trying to do.
Okay, and then so tell us about the AI Fund then. You said it's a venture studio. Kind of how did you get there? I understand you've had startups in the past. You've worked at a lot of companies, have a very interesting and kind of pattern career, and we can go into that in a bit. But just maybe touch on, why you went to AI Fund, how you got in maybe, and then kind of what they provided, what you learned there, what you kind of took out of it.
Sure. So to give you context, the AI Fund is a $176 million fund backed by some of the best names in the venture world: NEA, Greylock, SoftBank, and Sequoia. And it's led by Dr. Andrew Ng, who's one of the preeminent research scientists within AI specifically. He's a comp sci professor at Stanford, He's been one of the founders of Google Brain, which is Google's AI initiative. He's also been the chief data scientist at Baidu, right? China's version of Amazon and Google combined. So the opportunity to work with him and his team obviously is a huge appeal. But specifically the mandate and the remit that they gave me is something that was extremely, extremely appealing. The remit for the fund is essentially to bring and leverage AI and ML technology to vast consumer applications. Not I mean consumer applications like consumer mobile apps. I mean in the fact that, AI, and this is all pre-chat GPT fervor, but AI was sort of seen, at least from my perspective, as being extremely, on one end, super futuristic, robotics, deep tech. On the other end, really driven by economic hunger. How do I make sure Suraj buys more shit from Instagram because we're going to power this algorithm to show him shit that he doesn't really need, right? But there's a lot of applications to AI that should be out there, and there should be folks like me and entrepreneurs that should be working on real world problems. So my mandate was, let's look at housing, let's look at living. So that got me obsessed with understanding the rental ecosystem, and that led me to what we're building at Sunrise today. The venture studio model is also something that was super attractive. Having started companies before, especially day zero, person zero, it's a lonely journey, right? There's a limited amount of resources, a limited amount of time. I've really bought into the venture studio model where from that get-go, you have access to resources, people, and support. And that has enabled coming to market in a very, very swift manner with support, with capital, where it's all systems go now.
Nice,
That's
love
fascinating. I find that point really, really interesting, given that you've had successful exits at companies in the past, and then next time around, it's like, yes, actually, you know what? I'm gonna go with the venture studio, because it almost strikes me as, I don't know, this is probably my bias, but I would have looked at it previously of, if you're a first-time founder, you'd go with the venture studio, and then once you've done it successfully, once you're like, oh, well, I know what I'm doing now, I'm gonna go off for myself. But so, to any sort of startup founders, early stage founders out there, first time founders, what would you say is the pros and cons of venture studio and no venture studio for a first execution of a company?
Great question. I would have to think long and hard what the cons are, especially if you're a first time founder. Having been a first time founder before, looking back, 100%, there's tons of mistakes that were made. There are tons of assumptions or hypotheses that were unproven that we harped on for way too long. And that cost us time, money, and opportunity. Mm-hmm. To help circumvent that, the more talent you have around you, the talent you have in terms of the team you have around you, the support that you have, that benefits you, or rather circumvents all those obstacles, right? And I'm a huge proponent of just making sure that you're surrounding yourself, especially if you're a first-time founder, of people that know more shit than you do, because you Absolutely. Don't know. And you need to make sure that you are agile in your thinking, and the assumptions you hold true may not be true.
It's infectious, right? It's like when you're around so many people with the same drive and passion, but maybe they're a couple of steps ahead. Maybe they're doing it a little bit better. Maybe they're down a different avenue and they give you a new idea. The one way I can relate to that personally with James is because when we lived together back in 2017, 18, we used to go to the gym together. And he was, maybe 2-3 years ahead of me in terms of his progress there. So I remember always going to the gym like, oh, what's he doing? I'll be taking notes mentally in my head. Like, oh, that's interesting. Like, I'm going to try that. I'm going to try that. And you have this little thing of you push each other harder, right?
And then Suraj knows as well that when I went to the gym, I was surrounded by loads of guys who were 2, 3, 5 years ahead of me, right? So it's just this virtuous circle.
Yeah.
The gym example is perfect, guys, right? Because it's slow, consistent, small things, right? It's not like, oh, this revelatory light bulb moment, like, oh, I actually need to do that. Like product market fit, this is what I need to do, not that. That's not how it works, at least in my experience. It's actually like these little tweaks, like talking about the gym, like one of the things I've learned, like I was working out right before I joined the call. And, one of the small tips I noticed, like, but just observing others that have been a few years ahead of me in my physical progress, is just curls, right? Curls and a little twist in the pinky makes a big difference in terms of like what you're doing and what you're working out, right? And to me, like, oh, that's a small tip. let me try that consistently. And honestly, I've tried that consistently. And in the last 3 months, I have seen difference in like just shape and form and definition. So it's little things like that. I think that the gym example is great because it's never a light bulb moment. It's small, consistent things done in a way that you can't necessarily just learn always on your own.
And most people just don't stick out at anything for long enough, right? If you kind of just sat in a room and just picked like one topic to deep read and deep study and deep practice for a month, I reckon you'd be ahead of, everyone except the experts in that field on that knowledge in that particular thing. I just think a lot of stuff in our lives is just spread out, and maybe we do like an hour a day and that builds up. But, if you spend kind of, half your day as we do at work, actually doing something that you wanted to do, it might be a startup, might be learning a new skill, might be some kind of scientific research or whatever, you'd just see exponential growth. But I think the problem is a lot of us do, an hour today, and then we might skip 2 days and we'll do another hour and then we'll skip 3 days and maybe we'll do back to back day, and it becomes very, sporadic and there's no consistency there. So 100% I feel you.
It's about habits, right? And just forming habits and keeping them concrete, but then being malleable as well, right? Not to take the other, I'm not playing devil's advocate, but like changing habits. What can you do differently that will elevate where you're trying to get to or where you're trying to go?
Yeah, we talk about this a lot. And I think Suraj and I, we settled on like, you need to try lots of things when you're starting out to kind of get a feel for, not only what you like, but what you don't like and who you are as a person and what kind of things you respond to. And only after time can you actually converge on the answer of, okay, I need to expend my energy in this direction, because it's very easy to juggle multiple projects and do lots of things, but only kind of 30-50% and not going all in on them. And you kind of think you're doing a lot, but you're kind of spinning your wheels a bit, if that makes sense. I'm sure we've all had that feeling. And it's about actually kind of tunneling down on the one or two things you really need to dedicate your time to.
And I think it's the sign of someone that has shown introspection throughout their life, right? It's like when somebody knows what they're good at. This is my skill set. This is what I like to do, and this is what I'm going to double down on and show the world and produce something for the world that's useful, right? Whereas if you haven't actually sat there and thought, because a lot of people say, I don't like what I'm doing, but I don't know what to do. I don't know what I'm supposed to do next. And my first thing I can possibly say to them is, what do you enjoy? Like, forget. And then they start saying, oh, well, I enjoy working on these projects. No, screw all that shit. What do you enjoy as a person? What do you actually like? Like, what makes you actually happy? Why don't you structure a life around what makes you happy and then figure out the path of how you can get there in a meaningful way? Something that gives you purpose.
And just to add to that final point, I saw someone say something similar to that, and you can do it quite practically, which is, if you're stuck in something you're not enjoying, it doesn't even have to be a corporate job. It can even be, like it can be anything really. Even your company that you're building, you feel like you're starting to lose a bit of steam on it. It's like, go back to the thing that you love most and just get involved in it in some way. If that's like a sport, some kind of sport, go join a club. If it's like if you're like reading or something, go join a book group or anything like that, and put yourself around people that kind of have similar hobbies to you. And over time, doors start to open, right? I can draw a parallel for going to numerous startup events and deep tech events and stuff like that, and you kind of go in with a very open mind, and at the end of it you have loads of new contacts, loads of new ideas to take forward, like paths to pursue, and you don't get anything by just sitting down. So it's about finding what you like, and not just kind of sitting alone and kind of mulling it over, but actually being proactive about it and kind of putting yourself in a position such where opportunities can start to come to you.
And I think that's, you hit the nail on the head on two specific things that really rung true to me. One is, it could definitely be your own company. You gave me a little PTSD. And this is back in late 2019. The first company I co-founded, I remember having a moment. It was around like the Christmas holidays. And I remember having a moment. I was working on something. It was late night. I was a new father. And I remember thinking to myself, like, I really hate this shit right now. Like, and it's not the up and, it's not a down moment or a low moment. Of course, being an entrepreneur, there's ups and downs. It's a roller coaster of a ride. All the cliches you would hear about it are true. But it was no, I don't hate this moment. I hate this, which is the big difference, right? And that's when I knew, like, something needs to change. Something needs to, there needs to be a big shift in either my work, my company, the world. And then a few months later, exactly 3 years ago, March 9th, 2020 is when we all shut down. And that shift provided the impetus to a lot of amazing things. Obviously tough in terms of lockdown and tough navigating through those things. But ultimately, I'm actually very grateful for what that opened up.
Sorry, man, why did you shut down? What was the company and what was the story there? And also, did you have employees at the time and how did you kind of deal with that? Because obviously that's a big theme, not just with, startups, but, layoffs going on at the moment, people losing their job. That must be very hard for someone in your position to actually be kind of, convince people of your dream, bring them along for the ride and say it's all going Gucci. And then suddenly it all falls apart. And how do you convey that? And how do you get that across without kind of burning bridges? I'd love to hear your take on that.
Great question. So it was I remember March 9th, 2020, literally 3 years ago to the day. March 9th, mainly because it's also Biggie's death anniversary. And Biggie is my favorite rapper of all time, full stop.
Yeah, man, we'll have you on again.
We need another podcast about that. Forget startups. Let's talk
hip-hop. It's got the seal of approval right there.
Right, but I remember distinctly, like, okay, the world is coming to an end, right? At least that was the overall feeling for everyone, and we're not alone in that. Now, we were a Series A company, had just raised some capital, and James, you said something really interesting, like, how do you sell something, get everyone on board, but then you yourself are feeling a certain way? Like, it's disingenuous, it's inauthentic. I don't think one should do that. Like, it's going to come across or it's going to bite you in the ass at some point. So the easy route was, okay, or what made sense was, this is not working and it's not going to work. And I know we just raised our capital. I know that we had this plan, but the world has changed. We got to hold on to capital. We got to fire 80% of our staff. We got to close down all our offices. We're going all remote and we're back to basics. And we got to sunset our products because we don't have enough cash to maintain them. Plus, my co-founder and I just spent the last week calling all our customers and asking them 2 questions. 1, are you going to pay your bills this month? And 2, can we offer you a renewal subscription at a 50% discount? I think we must have reached out to maybe 1,000 different customers. It was a blitz of a week. And if I recall correctly, I think 2 said yes to our proposition. So we knew that, wow, literally revenues are wiped overnight. And that was a tough time. It was a tough conversation. So what did we do? We had to pivot. We had to pivot to a new product and things worked out. But what were we doing? We were building mobile apps and providing email marketing software for luxury hotels. And hotel occupancy was in single digits during that lockdown phase. And you can imagine that a line item like my company was just scratched out from all budgets.
Yeah, that's tough. Was this a Porter and Sale? Is that the company? Yeah. And I understand, kind of doing a bit of digging, you used to work in kind of the hotel sector, hospitality sector within Morgan Stanley as well. You did some work there. Is that kind of where the advent of this idea kind of came about? Or, why did you see that the hotel market was, something to be disrupted?
It was a combination of a couple of things. One is, yes, my relevant background within hotels, specifically casino hotels. A lot of my work at Morgan Stanley as a banker was within capital markets and M&A for casino hotels. That led me to not only being here in Los Angeles and working with a lot of Vegas-based companies, but also probably half my finance career was spent in Hong Kong, where I worked a lot with Macau companies as well. So a lot of the development financings and the spur to development there. It was a really fun time. But I did have a chance to go work at Dropbox early days after my tenure at Morgan Stanley, and that sort of gave me the bug to want to do things more startup-y, right? I never was that 5-year-old setting up a lemonade stand trying to push candy and lemonade. Like, I was not like that born entrepreneur. Like, for sure, I kind of learned to be one, or kind of fell into it. I took a very prescribed path, studied hard, went to college, got a job in banking. Like, I did like that whole prescription. It took some time to kind of rewire, I think, my brain to really pursue what I want to enjoy. What do I enjoy? More importantly, what do I not like? But not to get off on that tangent, I had an opportunity to connect with my co-founder at that time, a brilliant lady by the name of Caitlin Zano. And she actually came up with the original concept of figuring out a way to provide authentic content, travel-related content to folks that are traveling. I was always on the road. She was always on the road. She at that time was an editor at BBC and worked for Travel Magazine and was in Switzerland and came back to New York. I'm also from New York. So I left my job at Morgan Stanley, left Hong Kong, moved back to New York. So we kind of serendipitously met through mutual friends, started talking travel. And this is back in like 2014. So this is before the splurge of all the travel apps that were out there. We came up with the concept to sell to hotels specifically. I was very much sold on a B2B concept where, look, if we're trying to get in front of high-end travelers, they're staying at high-end hotels. And it's much easier for me to convince a hotel to pay us $10,000 a year for this type of service for their hotel guests than an individual like you, James or Stuart, like, hey, pay me $599 a year. So that's how we started. And then we slowly grew, raised capital, went through the whole Silicon Valley route, and then ultimately exited in the middle of the pandemic.
I love the casual way you just said, we grew, we raised capital, we went down that standard route. like it's such a walk in the park, right? But actually, it must have been a bit easier back then. Can you maybe describe? It's actually very interesting because you're probably one of the fewer guests as well that has actually, been in the entrepreneurship space for, over a decade, 10 years ish, right? So you have actually a perspective on what fundraising was like back then and how it is now, and kind of, maybe how easy it is, or, what investor appetites are, or, how easy it is to get in front of investors. Can you shed some light on how it was, if any, at all different to kind of 10 years ago?
Extremely different. But I would never say that it was easy at any one point in time. It gets easier as you go along, regardless of the market. I'll say that much. But it's never easy, full stop. I would say back in 2014, 15, 16, or during my time at Porter and Sale, we had a big problem. We as in Porter and Sale, to be candid, we weren't serving a huge market, right? We did well in that market, but it wasn't a huge market. We were looking at luxury hotels that were independent, that had a tech stack that wasn't necessarily mature where we can help. That's a very smaller market. We did well. We had great traction, but we never expanded our product mindset, right? We were pushing on the product that we created. We believed in it, which is great. But I think our challenge was we weren't operating in a big market, and we also weren't tailoring our product to have a wider expanse. So that made raising traditional VC capital very difficult. We convinced some folks, and I'm very grateful for those supporters. There's still some folks that have been residually on my cap tables before, folks that I still keep in touch with. But it was quite a feat to even raise $1, to be honest. Now, we ended up doing all right and raise capital, but it was tough. I will say this time around, it not that it's easier, but there's more support and there's more learnings. So there's a way to navigate that I think, I would hope rather, in the last 9-10 years, makes me a little bit more facile in the whole effort.
It's probably less of a black box as well. I mean, you have so much information online about not just VC, how to raise, how to make your deck, how to get in front of the right people, who the right people are. There are so many kind of like free services flying around on the internet. I don't think there are any real excuses for people to kind of be struggling in terms of, where do I start with the fundraise, or how do I pitch in this and that, because there's so much information out there. Obviously not an easy task. In terms of iterating and kind of finding your own voice and angle on it. But in terms of, the basics and understanding, how to go about it, I think in 2023, it's probably easier than ever in terms of, putting your foot to the metal. But then obviously you've got the whole climate on top of that in terms of, it's a lot harder to raise than it was, say, 12, 24 months ago. You must have seen that as well, kind of firsthand. You must have seen just VCs just kind of start having poured in over the pandemic to start kind of really holding onto their purse strings and being a lot more selective. Can you maybe shed light on kind of your perspective on that? I think the obvious points may be, kind of looking for more profitability, like path to profitability or immediately profitable companies. Are there any kind of other things you're noticing from VCs that have kind of got their mind at this moment in time?
I will say, and nothing that you all haven't come across before, I'm sure, but yes, just like any venture capitalists, I think will, and this is not knocking any of my VC friends or funders, right? But the reality is venture capitalists, their main stakeholder are not founders. Everyone will try to sell you differently, right? But venture capitalist stakeholders are their LPs. They are asset managers. Their responsibility is to grow the money that's been given to them. Full stop. Their methodology is to work with founders. Sure, that's the medium in which they grow their capital, but their client are LPs. They are asset managers, just like a hedge fund. So to a certain point, like whatever notions you have about hedge funds and how economic animals they are and where they operate and where their incentives lie, those transcribe directly to venture capitalists as well. I don't give a shit what anyone fucking says. Sorry. but like they are asset managers. That's what we need to know. That's how you should approach them, right? So knowing that like has been a really big enabled a really big mentality shift for me in terms of how I've gone and raised capital and what I need to do. So what does that mean? Tactically speaking, as a founder, if you're out there trying to raise money from the market, what's the easiest way to raise money? Start from the beginning, right? One of the reasons why, and I failed to mention this before, so to your question, what's appealing about the venture studio model is the promise of, hey, you're in a pole position to get funded. You work with us and we treat you like a co-founder. And to be honest, the AI Fund, phenomenal collaborators. It's such a constructive process going through a residency program. It provides some structure, support, resources, but moreover, I've treated them like a fellow co-founder. Like there's a whole team and they're my co-founders. So at the end of the residency, like not necessarily a structured program like, by week 3, we're going to do X, Y, Z, but at the end of the residency, when I was ready to launch a product, conceptualize the product, come up with Sunrise, they, as my co-founders, were just in it with me to want to fund the project, to want to provide capital and give it a go, right? So that's a huge, huge boon. Now, given the AI Fund, given Dr. Ng's brand, there's a halo effect. My old cap table, other VCs have reached out to me. Just like y'all reached out to me in LinkedIn, there are VCs that reach out to me like, hey, what are you doing at the AI Fund? Those guys are doing some awesome stuff. What are you building?
Yeah,
that's a new experience.
I want to comment on that earlier as well when you said Andrew Ang, because I was actually Googling him as you were speaking because I had a suspicion of who it was. I've done about 4 of his Coursera courses. The guy is an AI hero. He makes it available too.
I can curse on this, right? I already dropped
you
enough bombs.
You can say as much shit you want, bro.
He's a fucking G. Like
motherfucking G, all right.
I'm in Los Angeles. I'm used to people like going out trying to take selfies with like celebrities. I don't give a shit about celebrities. I don't.
Andrew Ang beside the computer. He's like,
it's the most Silicon Valley thing ever. Like literally, I haven't experienced this, but I'm told if you're walking around Palo Alto, people are stopping Dr. Ng and like taking selfies with him.
Oh man, he's a G, man. If I seen that guy, I would be like, mate, write me an autograph, but just write me a line of code. But that's awesome.
He's a great soul. His team has been amazing to work with. And like I said, to your point, James, the experience has been very different. And regardless of the market, I think my experience has been quote unquote easier, but I think that's mainly a function of me doing it for the better part of 10 years, not necessarily market conditions. Although they do come into play. And I will say 2 more points on that. Yes, as asset managers, given the market, they are going to park their money in safer bets, right? And safe bets in VC world is, all right, I'm laying down 100 bets. I'm going to make 100 bets that are going after really big markets, number 1. Also, I'm going to lay down bets to people that have done this before. I understand significantly more why there's VC funds that are only or strictly dedicated to repeat founders. I get it. There's tons of learnings, right? And safe bets are with repeat founders going after big markets. So it is a reality, and it is a tougher hill to climb if you're a first-time founder without some of those learnings.
Deepak, you made a fantastic point earlier. I mean, I completely agree with what you said there, especially about the part about hedge funds being economic animals, but why look at venture capitalists any different, right? Because ultimately, the main thing that they're trying to do is create an internal rate of return for their investors. It's all about making money in the long term, and in this case, literally the long term, because it's a longer time horizon. I think a lot of founders, first-time founders especially, get mixed up with the idea that, oh, you guys are funding the future. You're funding progress and innovation and cool technologies, right? So I'm going to take that into mind and market my pitch deck to you in that kind of way. I'm going to tell you the story like that. Look how awesome we are. Whereas a lot of VCs, they want to know numbers. They want to know what's the plan, how are you going to penetrate the market, when you're going to raise your next round, what valuation you plan on raising it at. Because that's when I can tell my guys internally, hey, look, we got this huge uptick because this percentage of our portfolio has gone to here. So that's a fantastic point. And then I like how passionate you were saying they look, the hedge fund and the VC, they're no different. They're both trying to make money, and they just chose a different asset class. It's like stocks and bonds.
That's hedge funds invest in public equities or public debt. VCs invest in founders that are trying to build companies.
What do you think the social perception of the two is so different then? If someone heard VC, you think like, t-shirt, jeans, cool guy, like, hey man, that's cool, let's go over here. Hedge fund, you think, three-piece suit, stone face, let's make some money.
Maybe is it the creative? Is it probably the creation aspect? I think there's this pervasive feeling. I will not kind of absorb myself with guilt here. I kind of feel the similar way that people who work in finance are to a degree leeching of society, and this comes from all three of us who've worked in finance in the past or currently work in finance. There's this kind of feeling that like you're not creating anything, you're not adding value to the world, you're kind of moving numbers around and passing value on to the next person who does the same thing. I think that's really prevalent in the private equity industry, which is just an industry of buying, restructuring, passing on, and you got a circle jerk of 10 guys doing the same thing round and round, and the money goes like this, right? But in startup world, there's that real potential to create something that creates a new tomorrow and a new future.
You're helping to create, sure, right? Like, one of the biggest reasons I enjoyed or stayed in investment banking for so long. I remember one of the first deals that I got to work on was a junk bond deal for a Native American tribe, right? So the Native American tribes have carte blanche sometimes to build casinos, and it was pretty awesome. I think it was like a $500 million bond for the Foxwoods Casino Resort in Connecticut. And the capital was used to build a new tower. And a year later, we went to the opening party for that new tower. And I was like, oh, this is cool. And looking back, that's the way I justified it to myself. Like, this is something tangible. I at least played a small part in creating this. Now, yes, VCs also do provide capital to create. It's an amazing feat. It's an amazing part of that ecosystem. But where VCs have succeeded, where, say, traditional finance, whether it's PE or banking or whatever, have not, is on the branding aspect. That's where the T-shirts and sweatshirts and Patagonia vests come in, right? It is a branding effort. And this goes to any product, right? They're selling their product just like the companies they invest in. It is a branding exercise at the end of the day. And don't get me wrong, I'm not here trying to knock folks that have economic incentives or goals. I'm one of those folks myself. Do I want Sunrise AI to be a large company? Yes. Do I want to make money from it? Yes. Is that my primary purpose? No. Is it purposeful in what I'm trying to do? Yes. And I honestly believe like all that other stuff, those secondary goals or benefits and perks, those will ultimately materialize and manifest themselves if you are genuine in the purpose you're trying to pursue, right? So as long as your North Star stays authentic, I trust the process. I trust mostly myself that all that other shit I'll fucking get. I'll get. It's great. And one of the things you said, James, earlier in our conversation, I think it was the first 5 minutes, I actually marked it down, was like, what is it that you said something about, like, what is it that you value, or like you should go after, what's important to you and what do you enjoy? Like, I place a premium on the fact that I can wake up at 5 a.m., 6 a.m. I have the flexibility to work out. No one's on my ass trying to call me. I can make breakfast for my kids. I can hang out, chill. I can work all day. I can take a break at 3 p.m., pick up my daughter, take her to ballet class and swim class, come back, work, cook dinner. Like, I love the fact that I am able to be in control of what I want to do and what's important to me, and spend the time with the people that I want. Full stop. Everything else.
Is that the ultimate, man? Because I mean, you see so many people say this. I know Suraj and I, we both really, really highly value kind of personal freedom. Me personally, I probably value it more than, almost anything beyond, the health of me and my family and my loved ones, just having that personal freedom. And, we've spoken to entrepreneurs on here who are kind of in their 30s and 40s who have echoed that sentiment of like, maybe when you're younger, it's all about the money, success. And actually, as you get older, it's like, I want to spend time with my family, man. I want to just chill. I want to have some me time. As you said, kind of do what you want when you want. Are you in a position now when it's like, okay, I want to see out the rest of my days like this, and continue to grow companies and work on purposeful things? Or do you think there's actually potential in later life to actually go through another one of those iterations and transformations?
Oh, 100%. Like if I have the same mentality that I have today, 10 years from now, I would consider that a failure. I would be very disappointed in myself. I hope in the next decade and the decade after and the decade after, there are new learnings, there are new mental frameworks that I can strive for. Like that should be the constant goal, right? And the hope is achieving those new frameworks and just way of thinking, approaching life, organizing your time, etc. Like that can be big picture, like just brightening up or up in the utility of my life, whether it's for me or my family or my friends and loved ones, or like on a small basis, right? I'll tell you something I'm really excited for, and this is a tactical thing that I think other entrepreneurs hopefully would enjoy. But as a solo founder at this point, like there's a shit ton of things I need to do. I got to hire a technical co-founder. I got to work on this product. I got to talk to my first customers and people. Like there's always something to do. But what I've done is set aside an hour and a half every Friday, and I call it Moonshot Fridays. But what are the moonshots that we can go for? What is the thing? What are like 3 things that are just out of this fucking world that no one would think about? Doesn't make sense to spend time, doesn't make sense to spend any time on, but let's just think about it for like 90 minutes and let's just try it, right? And especially like just the way my mind works, and I think a lot of entrepreneurs too, like you enjoy those moments. You enjoy those moments of creativity, that space to be like, you know what, I have carte blanche. I'm gonna shut down the computer. I'm gonna shut down everything. I don't give a shit about responding to emails. I'm just gonna do what I want to do and just go down the rabbit hole, right? Like literally Alice in Wonderland. Let's just pop a pill and head down the hole and let's see what goes on. That's fun. That's a lot of fun. So anyway, that organized chaos, I think for me on Fridays is kind of what drives me. Like tomorrow's Friday, like I'm excited for that session. It's kind of weird. Like I'm geeking out. Like it's almost like I'm going on a date with myself, right? But like that's what it feels like.
It's just so relatable, man. 100%. I think we do. Suraj and I do the same as well. Like we're always throwing around ideas and talking about shit and just kind of playing around with them. Are there any like really interesting ones you can pull off the top of your mind of something that wouldn't practically work, but you actually spent 90 minutes doing it and you're like, shit, this is incredible. Like I can't wait till maybe in 10 years if the technology's able to do this, or give us an insight into what those ideas are like.
So yeah, I mean, it's all Sunrise based, right? So one of the things was like, look, there's a big insurance application to this. I interned as a 19-year-old at an insurance brokerage firm. This is going back, I'm dating myself, over 20 years ago, right? I reached out to one dude who is an amazing person. He was probably one of the few folks. He was like in his 20s. He was, it was his first full-time job, I believe. He was the only person that was kind of like nice to me, right? Like kind of showed me the ropes. I was an awkward, skinny Indian kid from Queens, trekking in Manhattan at this corporate brokerage, and I looked awkward wearing a tie. I was wearing my uncle's tie, and I remember this other dude, like he just kept making fun of me, and like it was also like the late 90s, and like and looking back, I'm like, man, like that was a shitty experience, and like I'll be honest, like I was 19, like. The guy made me cry. I'm here trying to make things work. I'm fucking crying like because the good guys like just joning on me, and I'm like, you feeling shitty about yourself. So I think about that experience. But this other guy, he just was really nice to me. He's like, hey, don't worry about it, man. Let me show you how to do X, Y, and Z. Let me teach you. And now he's CEO at one of the largest insurance companies, right, globally. So I was like, you know what? Fuck it. I'm just gonna call him. Called him. He was so receptive to my idea. He's like, let's work together. He's going to come on as an advisor to my company. And I was like, I would not have thought about this. I would not have thought about my experience, me crying at the desk as a 19-year-old getting made fun of for an awkward, shitty tie, to now fast forward 2 decades plus later where I'm calling the CEO of one of the largest companies and saying, hey, look at this awesome fucking solution I'm building. I want you on my team.
That's amazing,
like,
man.
That wouldn't have happened without me going down the rabbit hole for those 90 minutes.
Well, I think there's a lesson there as well, an interesting sort of subsidiary lesson in what you just said. look how far being nice to people can take you in life. Just being someone that offers a helping hand. You never know who you meet. You never know who you might help and who they might become in the future and how they might come back and help you. It's interesting that the guy that was treated you like shit, you don't know, no one knows his name. The guy who's actually kind to you, I know it's anecdotal, but still very interesting. He's now big CEO.
He is a very kind person, and I think kindness goes a very long way, right?
I don't think that's coincidental, right? I don't think it's coincidental that it was the same person.
I don't think so at all. I don't. If that's his approach to people and relationships, it's not a surprise in terms of where he's at.
Well, that's dope, man. It's almost like a real life. It's like one of those LinkedIn stories you see, right? You know what I mean? When it's like, I was on the interview and I treated the guy on the tube really nicely, and then I went to the office and then it turned out he was the guy interviewing me. Do you know what I mean? It was like one of those stories, but in real life. That's crazy. I love that.
It is.
And it's also, I mean, we don't even need to like. There are so many lessons in that one little anecdote. I think another one is definitely kind of, always. From his perspective, is like always reach out to anyone who may need help, because you're now giving him value. It's not just that one way thing. It's like if you're in a position of power and you see someone who's significantly below you, always put your hand out for help. But then obviously if you're the guy who's 19 and you're talking to someone who's a lot older and more experienced, then you have to be willing to kind of sometimes take a knee and be willing to learn from people. I think there is a bit of a trend of people being quite arrogant. People are new in the game, and thinking that not that they know it all, but like they can sort it all out themselves. I know that's something I battled with personally, thinking I can do it all myself. And then going on a journey when it's like, and this is another thing that the gym taught me in particular, going on a journey of like, you need to reach out for help. And it doesn't make you weak. It actually makes you a lot stronger if you go to people with the mentality of, I want to learn from you and you have a lot to give to me.
I want to tie that quickly to, there's always this penchant to want to figure out what you love, figure out what you enjoy. Yes, but that's a very difficult task, right? So it's a lot easier to figure out what you don't like and figure out like, oh, I don't like this, I don't want to do this. And I probably spent way too many years in investment banking, right? To me, I feel, looking back, I'm not regretful of it, but I feel like it was a missed opportunity. Had I started my entrepreneurial journey earlier in my career, there'd be more learn. I'd just be farther ahead, right? Just at the gym. If I started working out 10 years earlier than I did, then I would have just made more progress, right? So I remember one moment, this was me working at Morgan Stanley, and I don't want to blemish this person's name. He's actually a wonderful individual, but he was like the big boss. And I remember speaking to him casually. It was like some social event, drinks in the evening, whatever. And he was asking me, hey, I know you like the New York Knicks. I'm a big Knicks fan. Painful, but I'm a big Knicks fan. And he was like, who's your favorite player? And I said, oh, my favorite player of all time on the New York Knicks is Patrick Ewing. He was an awesome center back in like the late 80s, 90s, right? And then he looked at me and he was like, oh, are you just saying Patrick Ewing because he went to Georgetown University and that's where I went? And I was just like looking at him like, are you that self-centered that you think that I would craft my response to your answer as to who my favorite basketball player is just to like get a rise out of you saying that guy also went to university? Like, I just remember that moment. It was like a moment, that was a light bulb moment, right? Where it was like, man, I do not want to be around these people. Like, this is not the community I want to surround myself with.
Because mate, as you probably know very well, it's like him saying that is not that you were doing it with that intention, but it's that he would do it to other people with that intention. So it tells you a lot about the environment that you're in, him projecting onto you that, hey, I do this to people to suck up to them, so I know that you're probably trying to do it to me. But he actually got caught out red-handed because you were like, what the fuck are you talking about?
Yeah,
that's crazy.
Basically. So
wait, how long was that into your banking career? Was that kind of, are we talking like first day and then you stayed for like another 7 years?
It was like probably like 7-8 years in. It was 7 years.
Shit. Oh man.
Banking, like honestly, like some of the smartest people I've worked with are at Morgan Stanley. I've learned so much from them. And I do think it's an intellectually challenging career, right? I stayed because it was intellectually challenging and I learned a shit ton.
I think that must have been the proverbially the straw that broke the camel's back, though. Like that can't have been you can't have been like all flowers and roses for 7 years, and suddenly this guy makes an offhanded comment and you're like, nah, get the fuck out of here.
I'm gone. You just crossed the line.
It's a wrap.
I'm out of here.
And the teams that I worked with at Morgan Stanley, I've been very lucky to actually genuinely like those folks. But it just shows like the mentality around it, and I think that comment that was a product of the environment overall, not of the individual. And it's not for me. Some people are okay operating that for the length of their careers. But I knew that was it wasn't the straw that broke the camel's back. It was the first straw that then I started contributing. Like, all right, maybe there's.
Man, at least you found out. I mean, when you were like, I'm guessing around the age of 30. I mean, like the guys who are in there, you stay in there, have their families, and get tied into the lifestyle. You seem to get out, before it was, while it was still possible. So that's fantastic.
I think James. I think we probably particularly biased because we both lasted less than about 3 years collectively in the financial industry. But so I'd say some people actually enjoy it. As much as that is off-brand to our podcast and what we talk about here, I think a lot of people genuinely just like the comfort and the lifestyle.
I think without going like too deep into the psychoanalysis, I do think there are different types of people, though. I've definitely, from my 2 years in banking as well, I've seen people that are definitely built for it and get a real kick out of it. And it's like, okay, you're going to be MD when you're 40, like you just are. But there's also like another couple of other brackets. The first being people who, I knew a guy who was literally like going to marry his fiance, and he was talking about quitting for months, but he got engaged and he openly admitted that, okay, I need to do this because, I need the money to pay for the wedding, this and that, and I need security. And that is a great example of getting trapped in our lifestyle. But I would also argue as well that sometimes school system, perhaps university system, do push us towards thinking that a corporate lifestyle is the best lifestyle to have. It's most comfortable. And the reason I say this because I know people who have done masters in impressive subject sciences and doing all these kind of crazy interesting STEM degrees, only to kind of throw it all out the window and go to banking and then stay there for a number of years. And you just think, where you weren't, I do not believe that you were kind of like 10, 15, 16 years old and like, I need to be an investment banker. You were there and you probably love science. That's why you did engineering or science-based subject. And when you saw the dollar signs, you threw it all out the window to chase banking. And I say this actually very personally because that is a similar thing to what I did. And now I'm trying to rediscover that side of me that as a kid that loved engineering and science. And I think it is finding that, making sure you don't stay in too long where it just becomes a vortex and sucks you away from what you really want to do.
Yeah, look, I literally was gonna, because I read your bio and I know you did aeronautical engineering, right?
Exactly, yeah.
And so like, there's something that happened that took you away from like, hey, I want to build cool fucking planes, right? Like, I don't know if you want to build planes, but like, there was some divergence in that path that took you away from it. And that is an institute. I blame an institutional framework doing that. And like our best and brightest minds, engineers, they should be going out engineering shit, not pushing paper and working.
Man, this guy just rewatched Wolf of Wall Street. He was like, you know what? I'm gonna buy a 3-piece suit tomorrow and become a banker. Do you know what it was? I looked at engineers' salaries and I was like, mate, nah.
I don't know where I heard this. Maybe it was a movie, but I think someone told this to me pretty recently. But it's like, the charm of like bankers and 3-piece suits goes away very quickly when you realize that people that wear suits work for people that wear t-shirts. Right. And that's when I was like, oh yeah, that actually makes sense. Okay.
Yeah. It's so true. It's projected to you, like, it's almost like an archetype, right? The CEO with the briefcase and the 3-piece suit. Whereas now the modern CEO is like the guy or a woman in a t-shirt or in a bikini on a beach, just saying, yeah, just do it there. I'll be around in 2 weeks and then we'll take care of stuff then. It's like, this is the life you can live now.
Yeah, no.
I think you always could live it. It's just a lot more accessible now, right? Like that image of kind of being that person is, and then there's a lot more routes to get it. I think enabled by technology. And it's like back in the day, maybe that was actually you make a good point. Maybe that was the way, kind of go into the corporate world and climb the ranks and be CEO of whatever industrial company is how you make your millions. But now the beauty of technology is that anyone can do it. You just have to obviously, find the right path for you, get started early, and hopefully don't get sucked into that corporate lifestyle for too long, because it can be quite crippling, man. But we'd love to wrap up soon, but I'd love to go on forever, man, because it's been a fantastic conversation, and we will definitely let you know when we're in the States and we can meet up in person. Are you in like LA permanently? Do you move around a bit? What's the deal?
I move around a bunch. New York, look, I'm born and raised Queens, New York, so I always got to throw in a plug for Queens.
Are you a 50 Cent fan?
What?
Are you a 50 Cent fan?
Of course he is.
Now
No.
Man, you're looking at the London's two biggest 50 Cent.
I got 9 shots through my chest just then, like. Oh.
No, I got no issues with 50 Cent. I'm more of like the Mobb Deep, Nas crowd.
Okay. Right? Oh man, there's no problems here whatsoever. Two of my favorite artists.
Wu-Tang.
Oh, of course, Wu-Tang forever.
Okay.
Goes without saying.
Hey, what about R.A. the Rugged Man? How about him?
Oh, you know what? Like, yeah. So now you're getting more.
I love that reaction. He's like, "Shit, we're talking real hip hop now. This ain't no joke." Woo!
It's good. It's good. Have you, along the same vein, have you heard of this guy named Mike Geronimo? I'm gonna send you a link. I'm gonna send like this is going back like early '90s, like rugged, like
Bro, I met Ari the Rugged Man. I seen him in Dublin. I met him at a concert.
Okay,
that dude is crazy, man. In Dublin, in Ireland. So I grew up in Ireland, so I seen him when I was younger. And man, dude was crazy. People were videoing him. It was a very small crowd, and people were videoing him getting too close for his liking. And after a while, he just slapped the motherfucker's phone straight out of his hand. He picked up someone's phone, just threw it on the ground. And then he just cussed at he'd be like, "Get the fuck away from me, you little pussy." And he just continued doing the set. And everyone was like, "Yes."
Like I can't blame him necessarily. I get it. But like I do make my way to London quite often, and like we'll have to link up and grab a few drinks and do the whole thing. So I'll let you guys know if you're here in LA, or even if you make it to the States in general, New York or the Bay Area. Let me know, because I'm always up and around. So it's always fun to link up with folks. And talking about LinkedIn, like you guys reached out on LinkedIn, I appreciate it, and like I always welcome just connecting with folks, especially like-minded folks. So I appreciate your time.
Now we echo that sentiment 100%. Being proactive, man, it's my number one life lesson. Like ultimately, I don't care how smart you are or what you've done in the past. You can be proactive. You can set yourself on the course to do the right things. And just be consistent with that. I love it. Same mentality.
What's the worst that can happen? You reach out. Doesn't happen. Like you're literally in the same spot you were before. There's no downside. So fuck it. Go for it.
It's like being a VC, man. It's about taking bets. You miss every shot you don't take. That's it.
Yep. There you go. Guys, thanks so much. I appreciate it. And thanks for joining us. I know it's getting a little bit later there. I'm cutting into happy hour, so I apologize.
That's all good, but don't worry.
24 hours a day happy hour over here. Big SJ, he loves it. Oh man. Anyway, take care of yourself, bro. It's been a pleasure.
Take care, Deepak. All the best.
Talk to you soon.
Take care.